She stood in that chamber like a force of nature dressed in calm. The lights above didn't just shine, they interrogated. The air, already heavy with expectation, grew denser when she spoke. Not loud, not aggressive, but sharp. Sharper than any blade. Her voice cut through the noise, not just in volume, but in clarity, in purpose. This wasn't just another political exchange. This was a reckoning. Across from her, he smirked. Confident. Ray Hurst. A man who'd survived too many soft interviews and thought this would be another. He leaned back, dismissive, already thinking of the headlines he'd write himself later. But he didn't see it coming, the turn. The moment when her calm turned into controlled fire. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words landed like precision strikes. No wasted breath, no misplaced emotion. Just fact, raw, undeniable, and burning with the truth of someone who's lived it. You could feel the discomfort ripple across the room. One by one, eyes shifted. People who thought they knew how this would go started leaning in. He tried to pivot, to throw back a jab, but she didn't flinch. No apology, no hesitation. Just that look, the devastating look that says, I've walked through worse than your words. And then came the silence. That brutal, golden silence where everyone knows the tide has turned. She had taken control not just of the conversation, but of the room, the narrative, the truth. He reached for his notes. She needed none. He stammered. She stood still. And when it was over, no one clapped. They didn't need to. The truth had already detonated. The moment didn't ask for applause, it demanded respect. But the story didn't start in that chamber. It started long before the cameras, before the microphones, before the power suits and polished speeches. It began with a girl watching her community get ignored, watching promises made in campaign seasons dissolve in the heat of indifference, watching mothers bury sons while officials offered thoughts and prayers, and little else. That girl learned young that justice wasn't given. It was dragged into the light, inch by bloody inch. So when she walked into that chamber, she didn't walk in alone. She carried the stories of people who never got a platform. The father who lost his job because his accent was too thick. The teenager who never made it home because someone decided he looked like a threat. The single mother evicted while billionaires got tax cuts. She carried them all. And when she spoke, they spoke too. He didn't know that. He thought he was just debating a colleague. He didn't realize he was up against the weight of history and the clarity of someone who never forgot where she came from. He kept trying to bring it back to numbers, charts, and sanitized talking points. But numbers don't cry when their water gets shut off. Graphs don't bury their children. She reminded him of that. Not with anger, with conviction. And that's more dangerous than rage, because conviction doesn't burn out, it endures. At one point, he interrupted her, tried to drown her out. His voice got louder, his words more erratic, but she didn't blink. She let him finish. Then, in one sentence, dismantled his entire argument, not with rhetoric, but with reality. And suddenly, it wasn't her who looked emotional. It was him, frustrated, exposed. Cornered not by insults, but by inconvenient truth. Behind the scenes, you could see age shifting in their chairs, phones buzzing, whispered conversations. Something was happening, and they all knew it. This wasn't a soundbite moment. This was the kind of moment that becomes a reference point. The kind that gets replayed, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. And then, just when you thought she'd said all there was to say, she dropped one final blow. A single sentence. A memory. A fact so specific, so personal, it froze the room. He tried to respond, but all that came out was a sigh. Not defeat, not yet, but recognition. Recognition that he wasn't the smartest person in the room anymore. Somewhere, someone was already cutting the clip. Somewhere else, a young girl was watching and realizing she wasn't crazy for dreaming of being in that room one day. Because for the first time, she saw someone who looked like her, not just included, but dominant. Not tolerated, but feared, respected, undeniable. And as the cameras kept rolling, and the official transcript documented every word, there was something else happening, something no file or footage could fully capture. A shift. A crack in the old armor of political performance. A disruption in the usual script. Because this wasn't about left or right. It was about who speaks and who listens, who suffers and who benefits. And most of all, who refuses to be silent. She didn't walk out like a victor. She didn't need to. She walked out like someone who never needed the wind to validate her truth. The room could go back to business as usual. But something had changed. A line had been drawn. A standard had been set. And for anyone watching, anyone who's ever felt unseen, unheard, underestimated, that was enough. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to shout the loudest. It's to speak the clearest. To say what needs to be said, even when it shakes the floor beneath you. And when she did that, she didn't just change the room. She changed the game.